So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second class on Pesach. Of course, you may notice in the background that tonight's class is being recorded from my home. In future years, we'll look back and we'll understand that there was unique circumstances. Manishtana halayla hazeh, like they say. What's unique about the circumstances why I'm in the house? I'm in my office in my house. So of course we all know that we're respecting the government's request for social distancing. And unfortunately the Chai Center needed to close its doors as everyone stays safe, and those that need a refuah shalema, complete healing, will have a complete healing. And God willing, very soon, we'll resume our classes in the Chai Center. Today, let's take for a second the opening of the Seder, when finally, after all the preparations, we sit down with our lovely families in our beautiful homes, and we sing the famous Kadesh Orchatz Karpas Yachatz. These are called the Simonim, the keys. We're very organized. We like to have everything in folders in our computer. We like to have all our books in a specific order. So comes the rabbis and says, wait a second, the Seder needs to be organized too by keys. So we begin with Kadesh, and then every time we proceed in the Seder and we cross another key, we announce it, and now Kadesh, and now Orchatz, and now Karpas. And everyone knows the famous melody, Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz. The children love singing it. But I want to tell you about a tradition that many people have. As they come up from shul and they're about to begin the Seder, we begin by turning to our children and we say to them, Kinderlach, child, begin the Seder, and they say, Kadesh. Wenn der Tate kommt zurück von der Beis HaKnesses in die Nacht von Seder, darf man anheben mit Kadesh. In Yiddish, we translate this in English, and it says, when our fathers come home from shul on the first evening of Pesach, we begin with Kadesh, which is being Mikadesh, to sanctify ourselves by beginning the Seder with the Kiddush. We lift up the Kiddush cup. There's a year where the Shbaler Zayda recorded a story about a father that turned to his child on the evening of Pesach and he said, my dear kid, please begin the Seder, my dear child. So the child begins Kadesh. And so the father says to him, did your teacher not tell you what else is customary to say after you say the words Kadesh? And so the child says, no. So the father says to the child, the teacher didn't tell you that after you utter the words Kadesh, you should say, when the Tate comes zurück von Beis Knesses, when the father comes home from shul, he begins by saying Kadesh. He didn't give you those two sentences after you utter the words Kadesh? And the child said, no. And the father was shocked. This was a custom that was done in all Hasidic homes, and it was a Hasidic school. He couldn't believe that the child wasn't taught such a basic part of the Seder Haggadah. So the following day, the father went to the Rebbe, the teacher, and he says, how come you didn't teach my child that after he utters the words Kadesh, he should say, when the Tate comes to from the shul, when our father comes back from shul, he begins by saying Kaddish. Said the teacher, I didn't want to get the child into trouble. Because you see, there are people with no children. There are people with no children. And therefore, for the people with no children, the father comes home and utters Kaddish without any preface by saying when the father comes home from shul, because there's no one to do that work. So in order not to insult these families, or a couple that's eating without children around the Seder, I didn't want to teach them. I let go of this tradition of teaching our children that when the child comes home, the father begins, they say the child begins Kaddish, when the father comes home from shul, he says Kaddish. I ignored that part. When the father heard this, the father was shocked. Who are you to take away a tradition? Who are you to judge on sensibilities? Who are you to take away a tradition that was said by Seders all over for hundreds of years, and you decided that what about the families with no children or eating the Seder alone? It wouldn't be right. So you decided to change what was done by families for generations. But that's not the point, says the father to the Rebbe. You didn't understand what the child really meant when he says that when my father comes home from shul, he begins the Seder by saying Kaddish. You don't understand those words, and therefore you thought that your sensibilities were so correct, you're so diplomatic, you're so proper, that you decided what's important and what's not important, but you're missing the point. When a child begins those words, that when a father comes home from shul, we're not alluding to fathers and children. My child and me, a father and a child. We're alluding to our Father in heaven. When our Father in heaven on the Seder night comes and sees how his children, his wife and his family, the Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish nation, have prepared a Seder. When the Father in heaven comes and sees that there's Pesach during Cronovirus, when the Father in heaven comes home, when he descends from the heavens and he looks at the nation that he chose, he comes home. He comes to his beloved people and he sees that, look, my children are conducting the Seder. I have to make Kiddush. When the God sees that the Jewish people, year after year, make a Seder, when the Tate kommt daheim, macht gleich Kiddush. Hashem will sanctify us and our families with bringing the ultimate redemption. And this, says the father to the teacher, is the true meaning of the tradition. Then when the Tate kommt daheim, you can't skip it because of our sensibilities. I'd like to share my own insight on how it relates to us. It's integral in Yiddishkeit that we are not the ones to judge what's important and what's not. We need to learn more. We need to learn how to understand the Torah and mitzvahs more and more, because we get to see the beauty within the world in a way that perhaps we overlook. Like the father said to the teacher, it's not sensibilities. It's a tradition that evoked the strongest connection between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Bnei Yisrael. You want to skip it? It's where we're going to utter such important holy words wenn der Tate kommt heim von Schule und sagt, Kaddish. May we merit, my dear friends, that in our Seder, let us utter those words, Father, come home. Father, come home. Show me your face. I need your embrace. May we merit to be Zocha to see the third Beis Hamikdash Remera v'Yameinu. Amen.